Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the northern reaches of the kingdom of Eldoria, where the fertile plains gradually gave way to rocky, desolate terrain, there lay a region shrouded in mystery and fear. It was known as the Forbidden Lands, a name spoken only in hushed tones and with a shiver. The tales that surrounded this place were as old as the kingdom itself, whispered in taverns, told around campfires, and recorded in the yellowed pages of ancient tomes. To the people of Eldoria, the Forbidden Lands were a place of no return, a cursed realm where time stood still, and from which no traveler ever emerged. Yet, amidst all the fear and superstition, there was one who was not deterred. Lillian was a young adventurer, barely out of her teens, with a heart full of courage and a mind filled with insatiable curiosity. She had grown up on the edge of the kingdom, in a small village where the stories of the Forbidden Lands were as common as the daily bread. But unlike her fellow villagers, Lillian did not shrink from these stories. Instead, they fueled a fire within her. She had always been different, restless, and yearning for something beyond the mundane life that surrounded her. While others saw the Forbidden Lands as a place to be avoided at all costs, Lillian saw them as the ultimate challenge. It was on a crisp autumn evening, with the sun setting in a blaze of orange and red over the distant mountains, that Lillian made up her mind. The decision had been brewing for weeks, ever since she had overheard a conversation in the local tavern. Two grizzled old men, their faces weathered by years of hard labor, had been speaking in low voices about a powerful artifact hidden somewhere within the Forbidden Lands. They spoke of it with awe and fear, claiming that it held unimaginable power, but was also the source of the land's curse. Lillian had listened intently from her corner, her heart pounding with excitement. The idea of such an artifact was irresistible to her. She knew that if she could find it, she might be able to unravel the secrets of the Forbidden Lands and perhaps even lift the curse that had plagued them for centuries. The thought of fame and glory crossed her mind, but more than that, it was the allure of the unknown that drove her. She wanted to know the truth, to see with her own eyes what lay beyond the kingdom's borders. That night, she had packed her belongings, a sturdy leather satchel filled with provisions, a dagger she had inherited from her father, a map of the kingdom, and a small notebook for recording her findings. She had set out at dawn, leaving behind her village and the life she had always known without a word to anyone. She had no fear of what lay ahead, only a burning desire to discover the truth. The journey to the border of the Forbidden Lands took several days. The further north she traveled, the more desolate the landscape became. The lush forests of Eldoria gave way to barren plains, and the sky seemed to grow darker, as if the very light was being swallowed by the land. Villages became fewer and farther between, and the people she encountered were wary and distrustful of strangers. They warned her repeatedly to turn back, but Lillian was resolute. She knew that this was her destiny, and nothing would dissuade her. On the seventh day, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Lillian finally reached the edge of the Forbidden Lands. The boundary was marked by a series of ancient stones, each one as tall as a man and covered in strange, weathered runes. The air here was thick and still, and an eerie silence hung over the land. It was as if the world beyond these stones existed in a different plane, separate from the kingdom she had just left behind. Lillian stood before the stones, her heart pounding with anticipation. This was it. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, crossing the boundary into the Forbidden Lands. The change was immediate and disorienting. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating, and the silence deepened until it seemed to press in on her from all sides. The landscape was unlike anything she had ever seen, a twisted, barren wasteland where the ground was cracked and dry, and the sky was a permanent shade of twilight. There were no signs of life, no trees, no animals, not even the sound of wind. It was as if she had stepped into a world where time itself had ceased to exist. Lillian pressed on, her footsteps echoing strangely in the silence. She had expected the journey to be difficult, but nothing could have prepared her for the oppressive atmosphere of the Forbidden Lands. It was as if the very air was alive, whispering to her, tugging at her mind. She could feel the weight of centuries of history, of countless souls who had perished here, hanging over her like a dark cloud. After what felt like hours, Lillian came upon the first sign of civilization, a crumbling temple, half buried in the earth. The structure was ancient, its stone walls covered in moss and vines, and the entrance was blocked by a massive stone door. Despite its dilapidated state, there was something majestic about the temple, as if it had once been a place of great power and reverence. Lillian approached cautiously, her hand on the hilt of her dagger. She could sense that this place was different from the rest of the Forbidden Lands, that it held some kind of significance. The runes on the stone door were similar to those on the boundary stones, and she realized with a thrill that this temple might be one of the places where the forgotten gods were once worshipped. With great effort, she pushed open the stone door, the sound echoing eerily in the silence. Inside, the temple was dark and cold, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. But as her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she saw that the walls were covered in intricate carvings, depicting scenes of worship and sacrifice. In the center of the room was a massive altar, and above it, a statue of a god, tall and imposing, with eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Lillian approached the altar, her heart racing. There was something about this place that filled her with both awe and dread. She knew she was standing in a place that had not been seen by human eyes for centuries, a place that held the secrets of the Forbidden Lands. She reached out to touch the altar, and as her fingers brushed the cold stone, a voice echoed in her mind. "Who dares to disturb the slumber of the forgotten?" Lillian froze, her breath catching in her throat. The voice was deep and resonant, filled with ancient power. It was not a voice she could hear with her ears, but one that reverberated in her very soul. She knew, instinctively, that she was in the presence of one of the forgotten gods. "I am Lillian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I seek the truth of the Forbidden Lands." There was a pause, and then the voice spoke again, softer this time, but no less powerful. "Many have sought the truth before you, Lillian. None have returned." "I am not afraid," Lillian replied, summoning all her courage. "I have come to uncover the secrets of this place and to free those who are trapped here." The god's voice was silent for a long moment, and Lillian wondered if she had offended it. But then, to her surprise, she felt a sense of approval, as if the god was impressed by her determination. "You are brave, Lillian," the voice said at last. "But bravery alone will not save you. The Forbidden Lands are a prison, created by a power far greater than you can imagine. The curse that binds us here is ancient and powerful, and it cannot be broken easily." "Tell me how," Lillian urged. "Tell me what I must do." The god's voice was filled with sorrow as it answered. "There is an artifact, hidden deep within the heart of the Forbidden Lands. It is the source of the curse, the relic that sustains this world and traps us within it. To break the curse, you must find the artifact and destroy it. But be warned, doing so will come at a great cost." Lillian felt a chill run down her spine. She had known from the start that this journey would be dangerous, but hearing the god's words made the reality of her situation sink in. She was not just seeking an artifact, she was embarking on a quest that could alter the very fabric of this world. "I understand," she said quietly. "I will do whatever it takes." The god's voice grew softer, almost gentle. "You are strong, Lillian, but you are also human. The forbidden lands will test you in ways you cannot imagine. You must be prepared for what lies ahead." With that, the voice faded, and the temple fell silent once more. Lillian stood alone in the darkness, her mind racing. She had been given a mission, but the weight of it was almost overwhelming. The artifact was the key to everything, the source of the curse, the heart of the forbidden lands. If she could find it, she could break the curse and free the forgotten gods. But the god's warning echoed in her mind. The cost would be great. Determined to continue, Lillian left the temple and ventured deeper into the forbidden lands. The landscape grew more twisted and nightmarish the further she went, with strange, unnatural formations jutting out of the ground and the sky a constant, oppressive shade of twilight. The sense of time grew even more distorted. She could no longer tell how long she had been traveling or even if it was day or night. The only thing that kept her grounded was her resolve to find the artifact. As she journeyed, she encountered more signs of the land's cursed nature. There were other temples, some in better condition than the first, others little more than piles of rubble. In each one, she found traces of the forgotten gods, statues, altars, and carvings that hinted at their once great power. But there were also other, more disturbing signs. She came across the remains of other adventurers, their bodies twisted and broken, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. It was a grim reminder of the dangers she faced, and of the fate that awaited her if she failed, but Lillian was undeterred. She had come too far to turn back now. She pressed on, driven by a mixture of determination and a growing sense of dread. She could feel the presence of the cursed creatures that roamed the forbidden lands, lurking just beyond her sight, watching her every move. These creatures, once human and animal, were now twisted and corrupted by dark magic, their forms a grotesque mockery of life. They were the guardians of the forbidden lands, ensuring that no one who entered would ever leave. The first time Lillian encountered one of these creatures, she was caught off guard. It was a monstrous, hulking figure, its skin mottled and gray, its eyes glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. It moved with a strange, jerky gait, as if it was not entirely in control of its own body. Lillian barely had time to react before it lunged at her, its claws slashing through the air. With a cry of fear and determination, Lillian drew her dagger and fought back. The creature was strong, but slow, and she was able to dodge its attacks and strike back with quick, precise blows. The battle was fierce, and Lillian could feel her strength waning, but she refused to give up. She had faced danger before, but this was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was as if the very land itself was fighting against her. Finally, with a well-placed strike, Lillian drove her dagger into the creature's heart. It let out a horrible, guttural scream and collapsed to the ground, its body dissolving into a pile of ash and dust. Lillian stood over the remains, breathing heavily, her heart pounding in her chest. She had won, but the victory was hollow. She knew that there would be more creatures, more battles, and that each one would bring her closer to the edge of her endurance. Despite the danger, Lillian continued on her journey, her resolve stronger than ever. She knew that the artifact was close, that it was only a matter of time before she found it. But as she ventured deeper into the heart of the forbidden lands, she began to feel the weight of the curse more acutely. Time became a blur, and she struggled to keep her thoughts focused. The land seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and she could feel it seeping into her mind, clouding her judgment. There were moments when she almost lost herself, when the whispers in the air became too much to bear. She could hear voices, voices of the forgotten gods, of the cursed creatures, of the adventurers who had come before her. They spoke to her, taunted her, tried to lure her into madness. But Lillian fought back, clinging to her purpose. to the knowledge that she was the only one who could break the curse. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lillian reached the center of the Forbidden Lands. Here, the landscape was even more twisted and unnatural, with the ground cracked and scorched, and the sky a deep, blood red. In the distance, she could see a massive structure, an ancient, crumbling fortress that loomed over the land like a dark sentinel. She knew, instinctively, that this was where the artifact was hidden. With a deep breath, Lillian approached the fortress. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the ground was littered with the remains of those who had come before her. The fortress itself was in ruins, its walls cracked and crumbling, but there was still an air of menace about it, as if it was a living thing, waiting to devour her. Lillian entered the fortress cautiously, her dagger at the ready. The interior was dark and cold, the air thick with dust and the scent of rot. The walls were lined with ancient, decaying tapestries, and the floor was covered in debris. As she made her way through the corridors, she could feel the presence of the artifact, its dark energy pulsing through the walls, drawing her closer. Finally, she reached the heart of the fortress, a massive, circular chamber with a high, vaulted ceiling. In the center of the chamber, on a pedestal of black stone, sat the artifact. It was a small, unassuming object, about the size of a fist, made of a dark, metallic substance that seemed to absorb the light around it. But despite its size, Lillian could feel the immense power radiating from it, a power that had sustained the curse of the Forbidden Lands for centuries. Lillian approached the pedestal, her heart pounding. This was it. This was what she had come for, the key to breaking the curse. But as she reached out to take the artifact, a voice echoed through the chamber, a voice that was both familiar and terrifying. "Do you really think you can defy me, mortal?" Lillian froze, her hand hovering above the artifact. The voice was deep and resonant, filled with ancient power. It was the voice of the jealous deity, the one who had created the Forbidden Lands and cursed the forgotten gods. "You have come far, Lillian," the deity continued, its voice dripping with malice. "But you are no match for me. Leave now, and I will allow you to return to your world unharmed. Stay, and you will suffer the same fate as those who came before you." Lillian felt a surge of fear, but she pushed it down, refusing to be intimidated. She had come too far to turn back now. "I will not leave," she said, her voice steady. "I will break this curse and free the forgotten gods." The deity laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "You are a fool, Lillian. You cannot comprehend the power you are dealing with. The artifact is mine, and I will not let it go so easily." With that, the chamber began to shake, and the air grew thick with dark energy. The ground beneath Lillian's feet cracked and splintered, and she could feel the power of the artifact surging through the walls, trying to consume her. But Lillian was not afraid. She had faced danger before, and she would face it again. With a cry of determination, she reached out and grabbed the artifact, her hand closing around its cold, metallic surface. The moment she touched it, she felt a surge of energy, like a bolt of lightning, coursing through her body. It was almost too much to bear, but she held on, refusing to let go. The deity screamed in rage, its voice echoing through the chamber. "You cannot defy me, mortal. You will die here, just like all the others." But Lillian did not listen. She focused all her strength on the artifact, channeling the energy into a single, powerful thought: break the curse. The ground shook violently, and the walls of the chamber began to crack and crumble. The air was filled with a deafening roar, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. But Lillian held on, her mind fixed on her goal. She could feel the curse unraveling, the dark energy dissipating, and the power of the forgotten gods returning. With a final, desperate surge of strength, Lillian channeled the last of the artifact's energy into a powerful blast, shattering the pedestal and sending the artifact flying across the chamber. The moment it hit the ground, it exploded in a blinding flash of light, and the chamber was filled with a brilliant, searing heat. Lillian was thrown to the ground, the force of the explosion knocking the wind out of her. For a moment, everything went black, and she thought she was lost. But then, slowly, she became aware of her surroundings. The ground was still beneath her, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh earth and grass. The oppressive weight of the curse was gone, replaced by a sense of peace and calm. Lillian opened her eyes and looked around. She was no longer in the fortress, no longer in the forbidden lands. She was lying on a soft bed of grass, beneath a clear blue sky. The sun was shining brightly, and she could hear the sound of birds singing in the distance. She had done it. She had broken the curse. Lillian sat up, her body aching but her heart filled with a sense of accomplishment. She had faced the dangers of the forbidden lands, confronted the jealous deity, and freed the forgotten gods. It had been a long and difficult journey, but she had succeeded. As she looked around, she saw that she was not alone. Standing nearby were the forgotten gods, their forms tall and majestic, their eyes filled with gratitude. They approached her, their voices soft and reverent. "You have done what no one else could, Lillian," one of the gods said, their voice filled with admiration. "You have freed us from our eternal prison. For that, we are forever in your debt." Lillian nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "It was not an easy task," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But it was worth it." The gods smiled, their forms glowing with a soft, ethereal light. "You are a true hero, Lillian," another god said, their voice filled with warmth. "You have saved us, and for that, we will always be grateful." Lillian felt a sense of peace wash over her, a feeling of fulfillment that she had never experienced before. She had done what she had set out to do, and she had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. But as the gods faded into the distance, Lillian knew that her journey was not yet over. She had returned to the world of the living, but the memory of the forbidden lands would stay with her forever. The curse was broken, but the scars it had left on her soul would never fully heal. As she stood up and began to walk, Lillian knew that she would never forget the lessons she had learned in the forbidden lands, the power of determination, the strength of courage, and the importance of never giving up, no matter how impossible the odds. And so, with the sun shining brightly overhead, Lillian set off on a new journey, knowing that wherever she went, she would carry the spirit of the forgotten gods with her, guiding her every step of the way.